Hello and welcome to my tutorial on making 1000 kick drums, well, hard techno, Schranz, industrial, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. So this is what we're going to make. You can even make like pots and pans, snare drop type of sounds, like. And the original sample's just like this. Or the kick like this. So just simple samples. You can, in another tutorial I'll show you how to make the kicks from scratch, but basically it's just like a sine wave pitched and saturation, wave clipping or something, like doesn't really matter. It's basically a bunch of layers. So in this layer I've got this kick drum going through a delay and then distorted. I used Hex Rose analog filter distortion thing, but basically the idea is to just distort it. So and as for processing, I've got the Pro MB on here that's just doing this. It's set to set in the mix drums overhead, and that's going to remove, I think I may have pulled one of these down just to remove the bass. Then not using this. Erosion to add more white noise. Another Pro MB, same settings. EQing just, the frequencies that you can't hear at the bottom and the top. Then I've got a compressor, and this is set to sidechain, and I've got just a piece of white noise playing down here. So it's just a really tiny piece of white noise. And this white noise is then triggering the compressor here. And this is just kind of making room for the transient of the kick. So without it, another cool idea actually is we could put this into a group. So let's group this and then duplicate the channel. And then we can add an EQ 8. So let's put this on the first channel. Let's put it before the compressor. Let's set this to cut off all the highs. Then let's copy this, put it on our second one, bring it before the compressor, flip this, so now we're just isolating the lows. We've got some clicking, but we can clean that up later. And then on the high end, we can turn this compressor off. So together, it's removing the low end and the high end. And then let's also, so this is what we're moving. So let's assign this to a macro. So on our frequency, let's say macro 1. And then on this one, we can also say frequency map to macro 1. And then as we move this around, it'll also move the second one. So we can fine tune it. And in fact, let's turn the compressor on here, but let's turn the dry wet down to like 50%. That way in the high end, we're just letting a little bit of the high frequencies through. So let's isolate that. I think something like that's cool. And then let's take a look at our next layer. Oh, this is the original kick. Then I've got a reverb. And for this, I used Nverb in Logic, but you can make your own version of it, or any reverb really. It's basically just, we're taking this kick, we're putting a shitload of reverb on it, putting it at 100% like this. So let me just copy this. Let's go to our original kick. And then we're just volume shaping it, so we can say shape a box. And volume, and then let's set this to quarter notes, and then under sidechain we can click one of these, probably something like that. Basically EQ it, so something like that. There's basically just a lot of reverb, and normally when I do this, I will, because the reverb will ring out for a long time, so I will then freeze it to audio and export it like you can see here, just so that you can then cut it and you don't have the reverb traveling over into the next sample. So I'm just going to delete all of this because I want this clean. This is our reverb, and it's pretty low in the mix. Here's another version, same thing. I've just made it louder. I make different versions and then I just bring them in and out, you know, to taste really. This is, what is this one? Okay, So this one is, I took the kick drum, I put reverb on like I did before, and then I sent it through a guitar pedal. In this case, I was using the grunge guitar pedal, which is, you know, I know it's a discontinued pedal from the 90s, but it's essentially like a metal zone, a DS1. I tried a bunch of different guitar pedals, used the Rat, that also sounded really good. The Sansamp Classic, the Hex Row, and I ended up going with the grunge pedal just because it's kind of tinny sounding and got a lot of high-end information, so I wanted just high-end really. And then of course I'm also cutting out all the low frequencies, and I've got the same Pro MB, same settings. Not using this. This was the Rat version. Lots of clicking because it's not lined up, but you know, I'm not using it anyway. Here I've got more reverb. This is the grunge pedal again, and I think what I did to get that breathing sound is I used Serum Effects, and then you can just come to filter, and then I used one of these flanges, so like a comb effect, basically turn the resonance up, turn this and turn this down. So I basically just used a comb filter on it, and then, you know, EQ'd out all the low end. So once again, then I took the kick and I just ran it through a delay, and then I cut out all the low end, I mean all the high end. Same thing. And this will make the kick rumble. If you want, you can try turning the EQ off. So let's listen to it in context. And yeah, you can just mess around with that. And then over here I've got this is turned off, so I'm not using that. This one, oh, here I'm just using a transient shaper, a few of them. I'm just going to delete the ones I'm not using. Not using this. So if I turn the volume up, I'm just going to copy this. It's very low down in the mix. So it's basically the kick, removing the low end, actually removing just this punchy part, compressing it with the white noise again, but this time I've set it to expand, which means it's going to, instead of ducking the volume, it's going to push it up. So we're now sharpening it or making it louder just where that very first transient. Oxford inflator. This is going to beef it up quite a bit. It's like going straight into the red, but I've turned clip off and this on. And then I've got a bunch of these transient shapers set like this. Oh, this one's a gate. I think without this there were some weird clicks. Anyway, the click seems to have gone now, but I was just trying to remove some clicks and then I turned the volume down quite a bit. That's it for the transients. Then I have a bass that is not actually, you can't hear it. It's just I think a sine wave from Serum. Let me turn this on. So it's just a sine wave. But I'm not using the audio. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm using this to remove bass from all of these layers. So essentially using this as the sidechain channel, like we did with the white noise, but we're just going to subtract the bass from, I think I did it here. Where did I do it? Somewhere. Maybe it's not being used. I'm sure it is. Oh, here. So on this Pro MB, I've set it to sidechain, and I'm sidechaining it to this bass channel. And then you'll see as the bass comes in, it removes these frequencies. So the reason I do that is for some parts of the track, you might not want to have much bass coming from the kick drum. And you could make room for whatever bass you want to make here. So the louder this bass is, the more bass you're going to remove from the kicks. The lower it is, you know, there's no signal going through. So I'll just play that. You could also put it at 50%, so you get a bit of the rumble from the kick, and then you could also just layer in another bass, you know, when it comes to making the track. That is basically how I make my techno industrial Schranz, whatever you want to call it. So then basically you can just drop in samples and run them through the processing all at the same time. So I'll start by just dragging in a one kick drum, or whatever it is, process it through this, flatten them to audio, and then remove all the silence, as you can see here. That's it. Okay, bye.